You're listening to Transcaster Radio, a podcast about trans life and all that goes along with it. You can listen to the show anywhere you enjoy podcasts, and we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review. It helps us reach more people, and we greatly appreciate it. Now, here's your host, Caden Taylor.
Hey Transcasters, welcome to this week's episode of Transcaster Radio. I'm your host, Caden Taylor. We have an awesome guest for you today. I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Jason Lee. I am the founder of Idratherbenaked. It's a community clothing brand that raises awareness for transgender protection, but also it's just about vulnerability, positive mental health, nature preservation, and just a good adventure. So spend a lot of my time just trying to speak with people about the LGBTQ community and the trans community specifically, and then also doing my best to live a positive mental health-filled life. So
that's awesome. Actually, I would love to learn more about your clothing company. I didn't actually know about your clothing company until you and I spoke. I had heard of it before, but I had never really researched it. What actually made you start I'd Rather Be Naked?
Well, when I was a kid, I always wanted to have a clothing brand, and I was always about design. I went to high school for interior design, and I've been an artist my whole life. So I got to an age where I was like, well, I feel like I'm someone who's got a more of an entrepreneurial spirit. So if I'm going to kind of integrate that with being an artist, I have to figure out how I can create something that I love. And I came to the conclusion that I wanted to create a clothing company. But that was something that was a bit of a challenge in itself, because it seemed to be at the time I was creating my brand that a lot of other people wanted to create a clothing company. Yeah. So I had to come up with something that would kind of set me apart from the rest of the brands. So I kind of focused on another passion of mine, which has been spirituality and a quest for better mental health and better mental health practices. So came up with the term I'd rather be naked. A friend of mine and I were talking one night, and that was kind of something that we came up with. And at first you hear it and you think it's to be without clothes, but that's actually nudity. Naked is to be open and vulnerable with yourself and the world around you. So it almost became like a mantra. From then on, we created this shirt, hashtag I'd rather be naked. So you could find us on social media pretty well. And it was also kind of like a controversial statement. So it grabbed people's attention. And then after that, just kind of developed it with different things that I loved, different imagery that I loved, and tried to keep a deeper meaning into everything that I was creating. So there was always that feeling of depth with everything that was created and put out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we first talked and you explained this to me, I was like, I never looked at it like that. Because our first instinct is to think without clothes, but I didn't think of it in any other aspect other than that. Do you get a lot of people that come to you and say that was what I first thought, or do people actually think more into it when they're simply not actually reading about the company or anything like that, just reading I'd Rather Be Naked?
Oh yeah, it's usually that's the first thing people say, and there's a bit of me that likes that because it's definitely a conversation starter. If you meet someone who is willing to be like, hey, I'd rather be naked too, well, that means they're willing to talk about some pretty heavy topics or some pretty vulnerable topics. And the funny thing is when I first started everything, like I said, it started with a shirt that said hashtag I'd rather be naked. It was because I was going to an event and it was before my top surgery. And there was kind of a bit of me that was still using that term in the aspect of I'd rather be able to be at this pool party event, because it was a pool party event for like 3 or 4 days without a shirt on. So, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it didn't have a hint of that aspect of that original concept that people kind of think of when they first hear the statement. But ultimately, it is a more of a depthy, a more in-depth meaning when it comes to the brand. And like I said, it's cool when people do come up to me and they're like, well, I'd rather be naked too. I'm like, all right, that's good. Well, let's talk about it a little more. So I go into depth and I'm able to kind of teach some of the positive mental health aspects just in that initial conversation. And then I'm also able to start to talk about trans issues and the acceptance of trans people, and then the ability to open your mind to the community. So it's like one of those statements that like I said, because it's controversial, it gets people thinking, it gets people's attention. But when the conversation starts, it gets pretty depthy.
Like, how long has I'd Rather Be Naked been around?
I think I'd Rather Be Naked has been around for almost 3 years now.
What kind of response have you gotten from the community, not just the trans community, but community as a whole, with the clothing company?
Pretty positive response, really. It started out primarily in the lesbian community. A lot of my initial supporters and friends are from that community. And with their help and their support, I was able to kind of speak to a lot of people in the lesbian community to help raise awareness and protection for transgender individuals, whether you're male to female or female to male. And then I started working with the bisexual community with a couple of different guys. And then now I'm slowly starting to work in the gay community to be able to talk to them and have them help raise awareness as well. And then the trans community has always been pretty supportive in itself. And then I also, after that, started to kind of work in each community individually in a letter, I guess you could say. I started to work outside of that community as well to see if I can help raise awareness for the need to protect transgender people.
So what are some ways that you get the word out there about not just the clothing company, but what it stands for?
I initially started with just social media posting, and then it turned into me traveling a lot and talking to a lot of different people that I've met through social media to see if we can create a collaboration effort to kind of expand and help grow each other and help build each other. And then I started public speaking. So I do a little bit of public speaking to where, but that's mostly for people outside of the LGBTQ community. And a lot of times I just go on stage and just tell people my story and give them a better understanding. I also do my best to kind of be an advocate just in general in life itself. I'm very open about being trans, and I do my best to help people understand that trans people are just humans who want to be loved and accepted just like anybody else. And it doesn't matter that their story of how they became who they are is a little different than everybody else. They're just humans. So I think it's a big collaboration effort of multiple different things to kind of keep the brand alive, keep the brand pushing forward, but also keeping the vision and the message.
Yeah, and I think it's important that your message is that trans people are human, because I think sometimes the cisgendered community thinks that we're some alien form or something other than human, when we're no different. We might be on the outside, changing what we look like and matching the gender we've always felt like we are, but we still have the same DNA. Our personalities are still the same. Who we are as a person internally and spiritually, I think it still stays the same. Maybe other trans people don't agree with me, but that's my perspective. I didn't change as a person. I'm still human. I still have the same personality I did before. So you're either going to like that personality or you're not going to like that personality. The only thing that's changed is my gender and my name. I might have had some surgeries to make myself feel more complete like myself. But I think the overall message to people is that we are humans and that we are no different than our cisgendered individuals.
Exactly. We're all creatures of this earth. And that's like one of the reasons why I focus on nature and adventure and being with nature too. And a lot of the imagery that I choose, especially with our photo shoots and whatnot, is because we are all from Earth, and we all have, as much as some of us don't like to think we are, but we are. And we all have a connection to Earth, and that is that we are human. And a lot of people, they see the world differently. For me, I was always this person. I just wasn't able to express it. And
Mhm.
I found a lot of comfort in a lot of people who do body modifications, whether it be tattoos or piercings or other things like that. Like a lot of those people really understand that the trans community is a lot of times the transition you see is you're actually just seeing an external transition. So
Yeah.
this person is changing so that society will view them as the person that they've always felt to be inside. So you're totally right when you say the personality doesn't change. None of that changes. It's just a lot of times it's the exterior image, that different perspective for people to see a different person. And I think that has been something that I've tried to focus on when teaching people is that internal person has always been that internal person. This person who's transitioning is transitioning in society to be able to be seen as the person that they are. And that's an amazing thing in itself.
Yeah.
So,
And I like how you bring it back to we're all part of this earth, that, it, in essence, it grounds you, grounds you to, yes, we all are all part of this earth. We might spiritually see something different, but we are all part of, this together. And I like how you bring that back because it's not something I see a lot of. People don't really take that approach with things. And I don't know why. I personally, I wish upon anything that, and I probably could, I just don't try enough, is to meditate because it's supposed to be a really good way to ground you to things. And I like how that's part of what you want your clothing company to stand for.
well, thank you. Yeah, it's super important. And those are just steps for general positive mental health practices too. That's something that they teach when it comes to if you're an individual who struggles with mental health, they teach you to ground yourself. And a lot of times you're grounding yourself back with nature and you're grounding yourself back with your connection with the world. So that is really a universal concept that I've tried to make a lot of people understand. And being a transgender person is just another, I think it's just another way you can kind of remind yourself that you are a human and you still need to ground yourself. You still need to remember that, yeah, a lot of external forces are telling you that there's something wrong with you. And a lot of times that's the cause of the mental health problems within the community because of self-hatred is formed because society still does not quite understand a transgender individual. But it takes just simple education to be able to get a better understanding. But a lot of people aren't willing to educate themselves. So as long as I keep up with general positive mental health practices as grounding yourself with nature and earth and the world that we are a part of, I think it really sends a strong message in helping people understand that just like everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious, what made you, I guess, focus into mental health when obviously there's other issues you could tackle? Why mental health?
I think it's just a topic that's very close to my heart. Mental health and the struggles with it kind of runs in my family. And I've never really wanted to be the type of person that uses it as a crutch or an excuse as to why I act a certain way or I act out or I make certain decisions. I've always wanted to be someone who is in control of myself and my actions. So about 14 plus years ago, I started studying different ways of, I guess, building mental health and finding a path of understanding and enlightenment. So once I started doing that, it just became, just started to build on itself. And it was one of the ways I was able to realize that much of my issues where I was not accepting myself fully, which then brought me to the realization that I do need to transition. And that also brought up more problems because transitioning itself is a really hard thing to experience because you are then having to change your external appearance, like I said, to the world. And a lot of times that's to your family and your friends, and that is a mentally draining thing. So if I'm going to participate in something that ultimately is going to save me from a lot of my own mental health issues, but then also brings up more mental health issues because of how society treats me if they know who I am, especially during that transition process. I have to be equipped to be able to handle it correctly. So in my own life, I knew I was focusing on those things. And I figured if I'm going to create something that I'm passionate about and I care about, it better be something that I understand and I know about. So with I'd Rather Be Naked, all this, everything just kind of came full circle because it's a mantra that I practice on the reg. And I also happen to study all of these different health practices and I put them into use. So it was a very personal thing when I started everything. And I knew that if I was going to continue to evolve, I want to help other people too. So as long as I gave out my own secrets and things that I've learned through studying everything for so long, I'd be able to help other people. And that's kind of why I chose the topic of mental health. But I also kind of went to the protection aspects because I have this internal protective thing that is much of who I am. So I figured the two would work really well together and be much of what I stand for and is what the brand stands for.
My listeners know, and I've talked about it several times, that I personally deal with a lot of mental health problems, and I have for a long time. And it's something very close to my heart as well. I try my best to keep it together on the bad days. And it's interesting because I know that there are times that I use my mental health as a crutch, and I don't as bad as I used to, but I used to just say, I'm going through a bout of depression. This is just how it's going to be. Instead of taking the hours and years of therapy I've gone through and coping mechanisms and things I've taught myself and learning to try to overcome and get up and do stuff. I mean, the podcast is a prime example. There are days that I need to get stuff done for the podcast, and I have personally been going through a bout of depression, and I just don't want to get up and do it. And so I have to push myself. Have you ever gone through that?
I've definitely gone through that, and I still do to this day. Like you said, it's not as much as it used to be, but it happens. And when it does, I do my best to kind of just focus on what I'm feeling and try to rationalize a lot of the things that I feel. And if I can't rationalize them, and that definitely does happen, I do my best to just stay compassionate with myself and try not to be too hard on myself, because I am human, you are human, and humans go through things sometimes. Sometimes they make total sense and sometimes they don't make sense. And that just happens. A life is a roller coaster, and it makes sense that as an individual of life that sometimes you feel like an emotional roller coaster. But you have to do your best to kind of, like you said, push through it. And a lot of times what makes the difference for me is I do my best to remember all the positive things in my life and remember the things that I do have that are around me that make me feel better. And that's definitely not like drugs or alcohol or anything, but a lot of times it's working out or it's talking to people I love and who love me and reminding myself that I am human. I will be okay. There is a tomorrow. I'm going to be okay. And I do a lot of praying. I pray just to myself or to the universe and just to kind of work towards a more peaceful and more understanding perspective of myself and the people around me. And it's just a consistent positive effort. I said, sometimes days are harder than others. I've spoken to you where I'm like, I just can't do something today because my head isn't in it. And I'm never hard on myself for those days because those days do just happen. But the next day you have to do your best to be better than you were the day before. So with that, it's all about a mindset, and it's about being compassionate with yourself and then knowing that you're doing everything you can to improve and to grow and to evolve, and then staying grateful for the things that you do have. Maybe it's not what you want that in that moment, maybe you want more out of life or more out of a situation, but you always have to stay grateful and compassionate with yourself and the people around you if you're going to kind of work towards a better tomorrow and a better internal voice towards yourself. And it's so important that you don't spend time and wallow in the negativity and spend time on those negative thoughts that are only there to bring you down and will ultimately not be very productive for yourself, your mental health, your future, and everything that you stand for.
To me, the thing that stands the most to me is compassion for yourself, because I used to beat myself up when I would, be like, I'm just not having a good day today and I'm tired and I need to take a nap, or that I don't do that one task that I said earlier in the day that I was going to do and I wanted to get done. And I realized that the more I did that, the more I wallowed in negative talk and negative thinking. And if I was going through depression at that time, made it, antagonized it. And by providing myself self-compassion and not self, don't be pitied toward yourself, but just true compassion, being truly compassionate to yourself, I think has overall helped my mental health over the years, because I haven't been beating myself up every day because, I don't get something done. But I also have gotten to the point where I try not to do unrealistic expectations of myself. And it's interesting because my fiance is in pharmacy school to be a pharmacist. And right. I've realized over the last she's been in school for almost 2.5 years, she's very hard on herself. She wants to get all A's, and I mean, it's pharmacy school. It's hard, it's rigorous. It's very rigorous, like, being in a med school, because I mean, they're going to be a doctor at the end of it. So I try to encourage her not to, be so hard on herself. And because I realized being so hard on yourself doesn't do much for you and definitely hurts your mental health, I think, overall.
Most definitely. I mean, when you think about it, if you're hard on yourself, you're just adding to that internal voice that is causing you depression, and it's creating a cycle that you kind of get stuck in. I think it's definitely good to be driven. It's good to strive for things. It's good to set goals and then want to keep moving forward and to succeed and be the very best you possibly can. But the thing is failure does happen. Things do happen that prevent you from getting to that point, whether it be an external force or an internal force. And with compassion, you find a balance and you find a way to kind of continue to push forward. Even if you fail, you learn from things and you just continue that process of growing. And so many times I found myself in the past, and I'm sure you can relate, to where when you're hard to yourself, you just get in this constant cycle that continues to kind of spin, and it kind of digs a hole for yourself. And then it's hard to climb out of that. So with compassion, you kind of break that cycle and you can kind of find yourself moving forward. And then once you become more compassionate with yourself, you become more compassionate with others too. And you find yourself growing and you find other people around you growing too. And it's just this very, very healing aspect that helps other people be better. It helps yourself be better, but it also helps you reach your goals too.
I want to touch on spirituality and faith in something, regardless if it's God, if it's Buddha, regardless of what it is. I think is from conversations I've had with trans people, always tends to be a topic they don't want to discuss. I was raised Catholic, and the people in my life that are still very Catholic, pushed the fact that their God is not okay with me being trans. And I think because that agenda is out there, that a lot of trans people either don't want to talk about it or don't necessarily want to touch in on their spiritual side. I'm a spiritual person. I was not always, but in the last probably 5 or 6 years, I've become a spiritual person. And I don't know how you feel in regards to how it helps you as an overall being, but in regards to my mental health, it being a spiritual person and believing in something other than myself has helped. Do you find that that is true for you, or that you have interacted with other trans people in the same way I have? Or are there, and I'm not saying that every trans person feels this way. That's certainly not true. Everybody is different. But just from the bulk of trans people I have talked to, that's kind of the feeling I've gotten.
Firstly, I'm a very, very spiritual person. I have been for a very long time. As long as I can remember, when I was an athlete, I would pray constantly and I would focus and do everything I can. It pretty much makes up most of who I am as a person. My spirituality and the connection that I feel with it and with a higher force makes me who I am. And I think I find it to be one of the most healing parts of myself. So when I go through something, I always turn to prayer first. And I think it's really common for a lot of people within the community to not want to turn to that aspect and not want to admit a spiritual connection because, like you said, of all the negative things that have been received from certain religions. And I think a lot of times when you really do your research, you find that those perspectives that are so negative towards trans people when they come from a religious standpoint are incredibly uneducated. I've met quite a few people who are outside of the LGBTQ community who have done their research. And if you go based upon the Bible, it doesn't say anything about being trans is bad. There's nothing in there. So a lot of times those people are using one shoe fits all type of perspective and trying to put a person in a box because they don't necessarily understand something. And a lot of times if you don't understand something, you push towards a fear mindset, which then kind of makes that person then go use their religion as a crutch and a fuel for their own fear and for that own negative mindset. I think a lot of times that you find certain trans individuals or people as a whole within the trans community and even the LGBTQ community to steer away from religion is because of how they've been treated by people who are ultimately very uneducated when it comes to spirituality and what it actually says in the Bible, or whether you believe in that or different religions itself. I've been studying a lot of different religions growing up as well. And I like to point out the difference between religion and spirituality. I think a religion has a lot of practices in it, and you're just supposed to follow this set of rules and expect everything to be okay. And I think when you focus on your spiritual connection, you understand that, like I said before, we are of this earth and we do have a connection. And if we do our best to grow as a person and help that connection grow, we'll ultimately be okay, be happier, be more evolved, be enlightened, and have a better understanding. And I think it's very important that we remember that those individuals who are putting hate on us are not people you need to listen to. And Dr. Seuss said it best, those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with people's religion. That has nothing to do with people's spiritual aspect. It boils down to that they just don't have the right mindset or ability or want to understand this person who has a different life or different lifestyle as them. And like I said, I think it's just due to lack of education and lack of really understanding and lack of personal time to really sit and think, is this really a bad thing or is this just something I don't understand? And spirituality, praying, it's been a lifesaver for me and has been throughout my entire life. I believe truly if people focused more on their connection and their ability to connect with a higher power, like I said, like you said, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, I think they'll ultimately be a little happier or have a better understanding of things and be able to let go of certain aspects and certain hate that they have experienced from individuals who ultimately are just uneducated.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I kind of have a love-hate relationship with religion, because there are certain religions that I feel like can be very harmful to you, regardless if you're trans or not. The fact that you have to follow certain rules and to feel sometimes something as much as just your own worthiness as a person. Especially some religions in regards to women and where they are on the totem pole in regards to, what they're allowed to do. And so, although I was raised Catholic, I went through that religion, and I obviously no longer practice that. I still, I spent a long time in that religion. And so I don't think I could ever go back to a religion. And it's interesting because I had a conversation, an interview on this podcast. I'm not sure if you listened to it, but it's the interview with Pastor Amy. And she is a pastor, but she's also a trans woman. And it is, to date, the most listened episode on this podcast. And it really is an awesome episode. And although she's evangelical and she has very firm beliefs, and it's because I had never talked to a trans person that was also a pastor until I met her. And she's just an awesome human being. And she talks about spirituality and faith and Jesus. In her instance, she, prays to Jesus and God. And she talks about how, the Bible doesn't say, doesn't condemn trans people. And since that, I've had some hate messages on my social media, but I've also had some really awesome conversations with trans people who have, one, come to the point that they can be spiritual beings. And I've also had conversations with cisgendered people that said, like, their faith, or as a Christian person or a Buddhist person, we believe in loving all people no matter what. And so it kind of renewed my faith in religion and other people's religion, because it was, that one little episode made a huge impact on quite a few people.
I think that's amazing. And when you think about it, I think what people don't really want to admit is everybody's looking for a reason and a connection and a better understanding of their connection and their purpose. And I think throughout the years, throughout time, people have found that connection is healing, and it gives people hope and an understanding and a reason to live. And I think that's amazing that had such an impact, and I mean, rightfully so. I was raised Christian, and thankfully I was raised with parents who basically, they never forced me into a religion. They never forced me into anything. They just wanted to make sure that I understood that it didn't matter who a person was, to love them anyways. They could even do you wrong at times, but you still have to find a way to still have love in your heart. Now, you can't be naive and allow that cycle to continue of them hurting you. But when it boils down to it, what everybody really just needs is a little love and a little faith and a little belief that they can be okay and that everything will be okay.
So one of the things that when I became an adult, I came from a family that they talked a lot about religion and a lot about politics. And they were never nice conversations. And so I always said, I'm never going to talk about religion and I'm never going to talk about politics. But I think I talk more about the two of those things than I talk about anything else, because they tend to be the most controversial topics you can talk to with
No
somebody.
doubt. No doubt.
And I am an avid listener, and I am not one person that pushes my opinion on somebody else. Of course, I have my own opinion. We all do. But
Right.
I don't push it. If you don't agree with me, that's okay. But I'm definitely going to get at least my thoughts out there and my opinions on whatever it is that we're discussing. So if any of the listeners haven't checked out that episode, go find interview with Pastor Amy and definitely listen to that. So I'm curious, you travel and you talk to people, and we had talked previously how you had done it for a while consistently. Did you ever get into advocacy work before you started I'd Rather Be Naked, or did that just kind of fall into your lap?
I think when I was younger, I raced BMX for about 10 years and I traveled all over. And at that point, I was open about my sexuality. At that time, I identified as a lesbian. So I still did my best to kind of be open and talk about that. So I think, and at that point, I was a good racer. I had a lot of wins. I had a couple titles. So I was a little bit in the BMX spotlight. So I had opportunity to talk to people about different things. And I did my best to kind of talk to people about how people with different sexualities are the same. So I think I've always been an individual who's just been open. So that kind of somehow turned into a style of advocacy. It's more of an intimate style of advocacy. I like to talk to people one-on-one or just a couple people at a time, just to kind of, I guess, help people understand, if anything, move blocks inside of their head to help them get to a better understanding of the world, and just help them get that there isn't really one walk of life that kind of fits all, and just help grow a more accepting and more compassionate viewpoint. I think that's how we as a society grow, is when we have better understanding of each other and we're compassionate with each other. And that's primarily what I've tried to be my entire life. I've moved all over the place. I had a life where I never really lived anywhere longer than 3 or 4 years. I think living where I am now is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I think I've lived here like 6 years. So
oh, wow.
That has been a new thing for me. I'm used to moving around and meeting new people. So with that opportunity throughout life to meet new people, I said I just have always been one of those people to just kind of talk to people about what I'm feeling, about my lifestyle, about who I am, and just kind of do my best to just teach people and help people. I've done that with my sexuality. I've done that with my spirituality. I've just done my best to be open and honest and healing for myself. And then most importantly, the people around me. I've kind of always been this way. And I guess I saw being at an age where I could start my own business and also transitioning at the same time. I saw kind of an opportunity to really kind of make everything have meaning, everything that I've been throughout my life have a little more meaning and purpose. And I think that kind of just all came together full circle.
I think a lot of people want to do advocacy work, but aren't necessarily extroverted or want to tell their story. Do you ever get nervous about how people will react to your story?
Definitely. I am not an extrovert by any means. I am an introvert all the way.
So am I.
I deal with a lot of social anxiety. Anytime I get on stage, I pray. I pray for peace. I pray that I'll be able to say what I need to say and that I'll be able to get over the nervousness. A lot of times, even when I'm hanging out with friends, I'm still nervous. So I definitely get nervous and scared on a regular basis. But I guess through BMX, I was taught, and this is something my parents taught me as well, is to not be overcome by fear. I've always liked the saying, courage is being afraid, but being able to saddle up anyways. So I've always prayed.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're courageous, it's not that you are without fear, it's that you're experiencing fear, but you're able to keep going and you're able to, like I said, saddle up and just do it. And a lot of times that's kind of what I have to grab onto, because being an introvert, I really like spending time alone and I really like just hanging out with just a couple people and relaxing and not really having to kind of go out of my way to talk or like do things super crazy. I'm just a very chill person. So it's always been kind of a scary thing, but I also kind of have to remind myself that there are certain gifts and there's certain reasons why I exist. And I guess there's a purpose to certain things about myself that I can't neglect, because I know when I start speaking more and I start talking to people about things that matter to me, I feel better and I see a difference in the world around me. And that itself is encouraging and gives me hope. And I just have to have faith in that.
Yeah, I think the one thing, I guess that's kind of why I hide behind a microphone, behind a computer, behind the internet, is because I am introverted and I would be super nervous being up on stage in front of people. Not that I don't think I could do it. I have learned over time how to be extroverted when I need to be. But the one thing that on days I want to give up doing the podcast is the people that I have affected so far, and the people that will listen to this podcast and get something from it, learn something from it, feel empowered from it, regardless of what it is, just the impact that you have on the community, regardless of how big or how small that is so moving. And I do work with a very marginalized population. I work with people who have HIV and AIDS. And so, unfortunately, it's still a very stigmatized disease. So, in almost every, at least my work in this podcast, there's meaning to what I do. And I think that makes me continue more. And I think that's why people are advocates for things and do advocacy work, because I'm sure you know that being an advocate is not easy, and you can have advocate fatigue, and it's hard, and you're always pushing for people to understand whatever it is that you're advocating for. And so it's not easy. It can be tough, and you can get some very cruel remarks back, whether or not it's in person or via comments on the internet. So I give credit to anybody who is willing to put themselves out there and be an advocate for whatever topic it is. If it's trans, if it's HIV, if it's mental health. And I mean, your clothing company is battling more than just one topic.
Yeah.
So,
no doubt. I mean, I think what it boils down to is if you're passionate about something and something gives you purpose, you are an advocate for that. Whether it be that you like a different style of clothing, or you are into a different religion, or you are trans, or you're a lesbian. But if you have the feeling and you have the desire to help people understand it better, and I guess accept something more, you're an advocate. And it doesn't mean like anybody can be an advocate for something, and it doesn't mean that you have to be an individual who gets on stage and talks about it publicly to a bunch of people, or you have to be someone who runs a nonprofit, or you have to be someone who gives money to certain things. I think you can be an advocate for anything in just regular day life if you're passionate about something and something gives you purpose. I think that also is, I think one of the keys to happiness is being passionate about something and just going all in and doing everything you can to help your love for that grow and help other people understand it a little more. And I think that's like the best you can possibly be, is just being passionate about it. And I happen to be just passionate about positive mental health and the protection of the trans community. And that has just brought me to this type of advocacy. That was never really my goal, to be an advocate. And sometimes I feel really insignificant because I'm not doing certain things that I see other advocates do that like I look up to. But I always have to remind myself the fact that I exist in the way that I do is huge and is a voice in itself. And I think a lot of people who choose to live out loud and to love themselves and to stay authentic and keep growing, I think they're an advocate too. And I think that's something that we all need to remember. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Talking about nonprofits, tell me about the nonprofit you started here locally.
I started a nonprofit locally called Transact, and it honestly, we started it a couple of years ago, and it fell off a little bit just because of the amount of time that I had. So instead, what we've started doing is we're just donating money to other nonprofits because we have a little bit of a fund that we kind of more so would like to spread to other people and then start just to do smaller work. So with that, we kind of have done different like blanket drives for the homeless this year. We're going to be doing the same thing, just getting supplies together for homeless people, whether it be clothes, blankets, toiletries, things like that. But we've also done some beach cleanups just to help the planet. So where I live, there are a lot of beaches and they're party beaches. So there's trash that happens.
That's true.
Often. So
that's very true.
Yeah, So we've done our best just to kind of just help push a cleaner agenda and then an agenda of helping other people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's more that I'd like to do with it this coming year. We're going to try to do more with it. And then by the end of this year, we're definitely going to be donating some money to some other nonprofits to help them grow and help push their mission a little more and see what we can do there.
Awesome. So a question I always like to ask people is, how do you think your work benefits the LGBTQ community overall?
I've gotten the opportunity to see firsthand how my work has helped people. And it's been something that I hang on to quite a bit to help myself keep going when I feel really, really down. And I literally have been able to help save lives and inspire people. I think that's the key word here is I've just been able to inspire people to keep going and keep growing and keep pushing towards a better life. I've had the opportunity to meet people who have told me just through social media that words have helped them. And I think that has just been what I've done is I've been able to help inspire people, whether it be inspire people to live, like I said, or inspire people to follow their dreams or inspire people to create more or inspire people to help others. I think that's what it's been. Just I've been able to be a little bit of an inspiration towards people because I'm very open about my struggles and my things and the things that matter to me and the things that have hurt me and the things that have caused me to be who I am as a person. And it's been just really cool to be able to see that there are people who can relate to that, whether it be directly or in a convoluted way. I mean, there's a way to be inspired by anything.
Yeah, well, you have to me so far, so
that's amazing.
Yeah, and we haven't known each other for too long, so.
Well, you inspire me as well. You're extremely motivated and you do amazing things. So
well, thank you.
It's incredible to know you.
Thank you. So tell me where we can find your clothing company, the nonprofit, if people out there have the ability and want to donate to it. Tell me where we can find that.
So you can find everything online and via social media. So you can find my website at IdRatherBeNakedCommunity.com. That has all my contact information. You can also follow I'd Rather Be Naked Community on Instagram and like I'd Rather Be Naked Clothing on Facebook. I also have a secret Facebook page called I'd Rather Be Naked, Compassionate Community Conversation, where I do my best to funnel as much positive content as I can. So you get notifications on your Facebook every time somebody posts something new. So if I post something new, you get notified and you can go check it out. If someone else shares something to it, you can go look at that. Sometimes we have other nonprofits who want to share stuff to there. Sometimes we have different radio shows that share stuff to there for aspects of advertisements, but everything that's connected to that page is positive stuff. There are people who are pushing a more compassionate agenda, who are pushing positivity, who are pushing understanding and growth and evolution. So you can find everything on Facebook, Instagram, and just via my website.
All right, everybody, you hear that? Go check them out. I want to see you guys all in the Facebook group. So, well, thank you. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit and chat with me. It was a blast, and I hope maybe you will come on again.
It's my pleasure. It is an honor to be on here. I really would love to be on here again. This was an amazing conversation. What you're doing is incredible, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Thank you. All right, Transcasters, that's all we've had for you this week. Thank you for listening, as always, to this week's episode of Transcaster Radio. Don't forget to tune in next week for another great episode. Until next time, love life, live authentically, and as always, rise up.